We're so excited to be back with you. Hopefully, a lot of you are joining us again for another year of Wisconsin Tug, and hopefully we have some new folks as well. We are excited to have you here. So first, I just want to give a shout out to all of us here on the leadership team, especially our two newest members, Tosh and Brady. So we now have 6 of us who plan these meetings behind the scenes and try to deliver great content for you like we have today. So specifically what we're going to be covering today, we're going to do a little poll to get to know you a little bit, remind you of some upcoming events. And then we have our 2 featured speakers today. We've got Lindsay Betzendahl talking about how she built Wordle, which is the theme of the meeting then, in Tableau. And then we'll have Dan Bolinson talking about extensions. So we are wrapping up a series we've been doing for the last few meetings on Tableau Can Do That with Lindsay's presentation. And then Dan is kicking off our new series on extensions, talking about the write back extension. And then finally, we will take questions and also we'll be giving away some prizes as always. So let's get to our meeting. If you want to participate in our poll, you can either put in this web address here, or you can use the QR code on the screen. We'll give everybody a little bit of time to get logged in there, and then we'll start the poll. I don't think I can grab that, but I can type it in. If you're just joining us, we're about to do an audience participation poll. So go ahead and click on the link that I put in the chat or use your phone to grab that QR code and we'll get started. Okay. Here's that code one more time. And Tammy is going to walk us through the poll. Go for it, Tammy.
Sorry, I was muted. I have house painters here, so they're kind of noisy. So I'm muted. I forgot to unmute myself. All right, so where are you joining us from? Are you joining us? We just like to see where folks are coming from. Outside Wisconsin, I love that. Love to see people joining our group from outside of the geographic area. Doesn't look like we have anyone from outside the U.S., but welcome to those from outside of Wisconsin and Milwaukee, Madison, other Wisconsin area. That's cool. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I think we can go to the next one, Jen. Mm-hmm. Okay, so just curious as we plan our quarterly meetings for all of you, what days of the week work best for you for a virtual meeting that would be from 11:30 to 1 o'clock Central Time? If every weekday during that time works for you, by all means, vote for all of them so you can choose as many as would work for you. It's always a struggle for the leadership team to try to find the right day that works for everyone. So we kind of like to get some feedback on that.
It's a close race.
It is. It is. I almost feel like having some horse race music here. Looks like Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Tuesdays kind of taking the lead. Okay. That is really good information to have. So what is your expertise level with the game Wordle? Do you play it every day without fail? Do you brag about your success on X or Facebook? Play occasionally, or you have no idea what Wordle is?
Wow, lots of occasional players.
Awesome. Awesome. Good news. Lindsay, I can't wait to see Lindsay's presentation on Wordle. So we have a couple people who have no idea what Wordle is. Well, if you're into word games of any kind, Wordle's kind of fun and frustrating at the same time. Nobody brags about it on X or Facebook. I used to. I don't anymore.
At least they're not owning up to it if they do, which is all right.
Right. Okay, next question. How familiar are you with write back extensions? So this is a capability of Tableau. So I use them every day. I've heard of them, but I don't know much about them. What are they? So if you are answering what are write-back extensions, then please stay tuned for Dan's presentation, because it'll be fascinating, I'm sure. So only a couple people use them every day. I think I want to get to learn more about them. I think we can go to the next one, Jen. Okay, so just so that we can kind of get a feel for what you would like to see beyond our continuing series that we always do, what types of topics would you like to see us cover in future meetings? New features, old school tips and tricks, dashboard layouts, how to make containers my friend, geospatial analytics, level of detail expressions. So, that could include anything and everything about LODs, and maybe visualizing survey data, if that's something that you're interested in. But just what kinds of things would you like to see us present for you?
Tammy, knowing your recent feelings about containers, I can't believe you didn't title that one "How to Make Containers Not My Enemy."
Yeah, maybe I should have. Maybe I should have done that, because they are my enemy.
They can be challenging, to be sure. Wow, look at all the interest in all these different topics.
Yes, awesome. Okay, we will definitely, as a leadership team, we will definitely take this feedback. So awesome. That's great feedback. So coming up in a future Wisconsin Tug, we are thinking about doing a sort of panel where we would give you a data set, and ask you to take it and present your dashboard, create a dashboard from this data set and present your work in a panel format, and then just talk about it. So I put this question in here to see what kind of interest there would be. So would we have people interested in doing so? We would need a handful of people to step forward and do that. But if we had, overwhelmingly no, then maybe that's not something that's going to work for us. But seeing as how we have several yeses come in, we will definitely be putting something out in the future. So I'm not sure which quarterly meeting. It won't be April, so it'll be either July or October, where we will do this kind of thing, wanting to get feedback as to whether we could actually pull it off. And it sounds like we can. So thank you. If you're saying yes, be looking for communication from us as to when to step up for that. The data set would be some sort of public information data set. So we kind of know what we want to do, but I don't want to introduce that yet. Just know that it'll be some sort of a public data set where you'll all get the same data set and then just go out and create a dashboard from it.
I think that'd be fabulous. So I'm excited to see people willing to do it.
Yes, me too. Me too. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for participating in our poll, everybody. It's always helpful to get to know our audience a bit better. Okay, back to our presentation. So next up, we're going to have Lindsay Betzendahl. So Lindsay is a partner and senior consultant at Health Data Viz, co-author of the book Visualizing Health and Healthcare Data. You have probably seen her work. She is a very prolific member of the community, does fantastic work, and we're so excited to have her here presenting with us today. So Lindsay, I'm going to turn that over to you now.
Thanks so much. This works. All good there? Yes.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, let me know if anything gets weird with the connection. I might turn off my camera to help if that ends up happening. All right. So I'm going to go talk about building the game of Wordle in Tableau, and I'll preface with this is the only game I've ever built in Tableau. It might be the only game I end up building in Tableau, but it's because I really do love Wordle. So for those who don't know about Wordle, I think there are a couple of you. Let me just explain what the game is. So It's an online guessing game that really, actually, I think you can only play on your phone, to be honest. Maybe you can play online, but I play on my phone every morning, and you get 6 guesses to figure out what the word is. And each word is only 5 letters, so pretty simple, simple words to try to guess. The objective here is to guess in the least number of guesses, right? And you're really only playing against yourself, frankly, because that's it. So here's an example: is when you guess a word, if the letter is in the correct spot, it is green. If you guess a letter in the word and it is in the wrong spot, but it is a letter in the word, the square will be yellow. And if the square is gray, it means the letter you've guessed in that word is not in the word at all, so you don't have to use it again. And then you'll get score 5 out of 6, 4 out of 6, whatever, and you have 6 guesses. Or if you completely flop, you'll get a big X, which you don't want to get. So I started playing Wordle in January 2022, so 2 years ago. I think Wordle had only started or came about popularity a little bit in November of 21. But like a number of people who started playing Wordle, you can easily share your scores. So I started texting my scores every day, or almost every day at the end of January. I was sending to my mom, my mother-in-law, and to my business partners. To this day, every morning, or whenever I get around to doing the game, I text all 3 of these chats, and they text me back. So as of just the other day, I've played 673 games. So there are a number of days sometimes I've missed, particularly during Tableau conference when I'm very tired and completely forgot about it. But these are my stats so far. So I have guessed it correct on the first guess 7 times, which is still a very small proportion, but it's also very difficult to do and completely based on luck. Most of my scores are in the getting it in the 3rd or 4th guess, which is pretty good. I'd love to see my getting it in 3 a little higher, and then I've had a couple, obviously, have taken me quite some time, and I've only missed 3 times, meaning I've had all 6 guesses and still missed the word. So in October 20, I guess it was really completed this in 2022. I completed my Iron Viz was on Wordle, and the topic for Iron Viz was games. And at first I thought, I hate this topic. I don't play games. I don't have one that I'm passionate about. And then I realized that I was playing this little online phone game every day for 10 months at the time. And the problem was I had to go find the data. Well, lo and behold, I had texted 3 different people every day for those 10 months. So I did a little bit of data collection and going through back all the texts that I had to find the scores that I had for each day of the year that I'd completed it. So this is the final viz that I had submitted for Iron Viz. The far right is the full length visualization. And as part of it, at the very end, I thought, well, it'd be pretty cool if I built the game. That way someone could use it. So this was literally kind of a tack on at the end of my Iron Viz, but actually challenged me pretty significantly to figure out how to build this game. So that's what I'll be sharing today. So I'm Lindsay Betzendahl. Betzendahl, pretty actually easy to say. People always screw it up, but give you that little tidbit. I'm a Tableau visionary and ambassador. I've been in the Tableau community and very involved since around 2018. I work for a company called Health Data Viz. We did write a book on visualizing health and healthcare data. So I really love data visualization. I do work in an organization that's focused on healthcare because that is my background and my passion. And I really love creating dashboards that are really beautiful to look at. I love design. I like designing dashboards. I like being creative in Tableau and kind of stretching the limits of what both myself and Tableau can do. And so you can see some of my visualizations here, which tend to look very bright and colorful because I guess I like colors. All right, but let's get into enough about me. So the game Wordle is simple, and so is the game board, right? Playing the game simple. There's really only 2 pieces to this. And in Tableau, same applies. It was 2 worksheets. So I have the guess spaces, which you see at the top, and then a keyboard. And ultimately, all this is just as if you were on a phone. You type in the keyboard, it types into the guest spaces, and then there's some algorithm right in the back that says, do these letters match the words? So I started thinking when I was developing this that I needed to do these two things. So I knew how to build the spaces in the keyboard, and then I had to get the solutions. So those are pretty much the three data sets that I utilized for this visual. So the guest space data was just rows and columns. I literally just needed a grid, 6 guesses, 5 words, so 5 by 6 grid. That's pretty simple. All right, the keyboard data, also pretty simple. I just had to make what looks like a keyboard. So there was a little finagling of making sure I had the right exact X, Y, and then making some shapes to create the keyboard. But again, making some simple data sets just to get started. So you can see how this ended up in Tableau. The very simple kind of XY coordinate utilizing these. So the first lesson that I'm sharing, so I'm trying to hopefully help folks learn something here and not just hear me wade through all the back-end calculations of Wordle, which I will do some of, but hopefully there's some interesting pieces that you can utilize in your daily life or in a visualization that you're going to do in the future. So the first one is that Tableau is simply a coordinate grid. And you may have heard plenty of other people share this knowledge. But once you realize this, it really makes it very easy to create your own data sets and kind of customize different views, right? So instead of just using the show me or a typical your bar charts and your dot plots and what have you, this allows you to use these XY coordinates and customize. So having already known that, it was really easy for me to already consider how I was going to build this game. So you can see even in a lot of my other visualizations, if you really break it down, something that looks highly complicated, not to say that this Forbes 100 wasn't complicated to build because it probably took me way too many hours to do. But, at the end of the day, you can break it down as dots plotted on a grid. And you can see that it's just some XY coordinates, and then these dots get plotted. And the same in this case, there's polygons. Those are all just dots that are connected together, right? So this is a really helpful lesson as you think about particularly, some of your visualizations that you may do, personally when you're kind of stretching some limits and thinking outside the box. All right. So how did I make the data now for Wordle? So the way I was thinking about this and the way I think about a lot of visualizations before I build them is to envision and anticipate the end result, right? So I knew the game worked. So I needed to make sure that I was going to make a data set that would allow me to have someone key in the keyboard, and then the spaces up top would populate each singular letter that was guessed. Then I had to have those guesses only show up for the first row, and then when someone pressed enter, they would be allowed to put another set in. So I had to think about how am I going to stop 5 letters and then allow them to guess again and keep guessing, right? The other part that was tricky is I had to think about ahead of time is that I needed the squares to change color if they were correct or in the right spot, correct in the wrong spot, or wrong entirely, but only after someone's decided on a full guess. So imagine I wanted to guess the word smart. I don't want it to say, and let's say I guess guess smart, and let's say an S is in the real word. I don't want it to show up yellow or green right when I put the S in, because then it's already telling me and I haven't even made the guess. So I had to think of a way to ensure that Tableau would only color it after an enter was clicked. So it really took a lot of brain power to think about all this. So this is what I'm saying. If I type in sweat, I don't want the E and the A to become yellow until after I press enter. And same as I press alone, you'll see the third guess, the A, LL are not colored yet because I haven't finished my guess, right? So that was the functionality that I needed. The second part I had to think about functionally was I need the letters in the keyboard to also change color when they were selected. So if it was a correct letter, I had the keyboard turns green in the real game. And if it's a wrong letter, the keyboard letter turns red. Essentially to show you, don't click this one again. It's wrong. It's not in the word. And don't forget to click this one again because it is in the word. And sometimes people do forget to use correct letters in their future guesses. And then I needed the enter to seal the guess, and I needed to be able to delete. So you should be able to delete letters, as you're working through one of your guesses. So I wanted to look like this. So after thinking about all the requirements, then I started putting together the data and ensuring that my data was going to meet my requirements. This is very similar to what I would do with a client at work, is thinking about the end result and the design that I wanted, and then figuring out what data I needed to ensure that that design was going to actually come to fruition. I don't want someone to give me data and it not work with the design. So I was able to find the full Wordle list. Now, at the time of this visualization, Wordle was still owned by Josh. And his last name, I forget. It sounds like Wordle. It's like something like that. Anyway, but it has since transitioned to the New York Times. So they scrambled up all the letters after, I think it was like maybe like July of that year or something like that. But before, there was an original list out there that was in the correct order that technically you could sneak a peek at future words and cheat, so to speak. So I was able to grab that, and I did not look at the future words, but I was able to grab that and then modify it. So what I did is first I prepped some stuff just simply in Excel to take the word from this original list and separate out all the letters, because I knew that I had to have each letter in the word check against one of the squares or the boxes in my game. Once I had that, then I brought it into Tableau Prep and pivoted it so that each word had 5 rows, 1 for each letter. And then I matched that up to another simple table that just had every letter of the alphabet, essentially. So that now you can imagine, as you see in this bottom right, if I have the word smock, I can isolate every, the first letter, against every other letter in the alphabet. So only one of those, the S and the S, is true, right? Everything else is going to be incorrect from a matching standpoint. So you can see here that in the example, so the guess is row 1, and then the columns are each letter option, right? So if the word is learn, the correct word is learn, and I put in stare, I can match up this first letter to the letter that I've guessed as the first letter, the L and the S, the E and the T, the A and the A, the R and the I, and the N and the R. So what you'll see is in the back end of some calculations, I'm able to now use these combinations to say the A and the A is correct, so that's going to be green, right spot, right letter. And I can also look at the combination of all the letters across both words and say, well, look, the the R in my guess is in the word learn, but it's not in the right spot. The column 5 is the wrong spot for the letter R, and that can be yellow, and everything else is incorrect because there's not a match either way. So, so now that I had my data and I had an understanding of how this is going to sort of work, this became the tricky part. How do I get all these calculations to do what I want? So I started with a wildcard parameter. So wildcard parameters, they don't have any baseline for it. It's just I could type in any kind of letter. It is what it is. So imagine this is my wildcard parameter, and I type in stare. So first I need to say, well, we're just on row 1, which is our first guess. So I have a first row guess calculation that says if it's row 1, then I want to split that word, the word guess, stare, and for the first letter. So that'd be the S, right? So I do this for, I split it at this, the space. And I'll explain the space later that comes in from the parameter action. When I hit enter, I get a space. So anyway, this separates this word guess, this long string parameter, into just the first row. And then then separates that word into every letter. And so that's what I end up using to match up. And I know this is all super confusing to kind of explain because that's usually how calculations work. But just know these are all the pieces to try to get this. Like, what someone enters, which is not one letter at a time, is a word, right? You're clicking the words that are going into a parameter and then separating out the letters to test them. So, but how are people entering in the word, right? I said before, they're going to be pushing it on a keyboard. So we need to have a parameter action that's going to, when someone hits the keyboard, enters it into the parameter, utilizing this calculation. So what I've said is if someone clicks any of the letters that are just one letter, then just take that parameter value and add that letter to it. Keep adding the letter to it. There's no removing when you deselect, it just keeps adding letters. But if they hit delete, then we're going to remove a letter from the parameter. So imagine the word stare, and then I go to my next, and I'm going to hit another, I'm going to start doing SM for smart or something. It'll add SM right after stare. It just keeps going. If I hit enter, then it's going to take this whole long word all guesses, which is one long giant string without the spaces. And then it's going to add, it's going to take each word guess and add a space after like row 1, 2, 3, etc. If it's clear, then I clear the whole parameter with just the 2 open quotations and the parameter's gone, or the value in the parameter's gone. So I'll show you this. So you'll see here, oops, let me go back. So I have the keyboard is what's triggering the parameter action. The parameter action is sourcing that field that calculation I just showed before, and then adding to this target parameter. So when I pull out the parameter, you can see when I hit stare, the word guess parameter shows stare, and then a space. The space is the enter, adds a space to the word guess, and reach, weary, and add these spaces. And it just keeps going for the 6 guesses. Because eventually I need to look at all these different segments of guess, as well as the placements and checking if someone gets the right word. And as I said before, the parameter has to be a certain length on each guess row for the colors to appear. So for the first guess, colors don't show up until the length is 6. So keep in mind I've guessed stare and I've pressed enter, so I have a space. So the parameter is 6, length is 6. When I hit reach and I press enter, the length is now 12, right? So that's how I am able to say, don't color it until the length of my guesses is actually one longer than the word I've guessed, but technically not showing up into the next row. So again, I know a little confusing, but these are how the complicated things I had to think about to make this happen. All right, so let's take a moment and talk about parameter actions. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have used them. If not, they are fantastic. There's so many things you can do with parameter actions in your visualizations. What I love about them is that they are user-driven. So they allow something like this mouse click on the keyboard to change this value of a parameter in the back end that someone else doesn't have to see. That parameter ends up going into all these other calculations where I'm performing a number of logic if-then statements on that parameter based on, again, someone clicking these in. So someone clicks on the button, targets that word guess parameter, utilizing the parameter change to say how the parameter gets populated. So let's see if this will play. All right, so you can see I'm typing letters. Nothing happens until I hit enter, and then it colors, right? Because that's now it's 6. The row 1 is now 6 letters in length. If I continue along, you'll see again that parameter starts to populate. You see how that's populating. I had to think about what word I was going to guess because I didn't cheat this time to see what word was even in the data that I was messing around with. And you can see how I can press delete and those letters disappear. Yeah. Going further, that's good enough. All right, so you get that kind of concept. There we go. So I have a number of other examples of how these work. So recent visualization I did is that there are two different parameter actions. One was a click action changed or brought a visual into the view, and then the hover action actually did some back end things in the calculation to pop out this silly viz that I did, which I have right here. So you can see here it says click. Oh, it's going to reload, of course. Oh, for heaven's sakes! Well, it's not the end of the world. I love my. There we go. So these are all parameter actions too. So I can click here, and that triggers this worksheet to show up. And then the hover action is going to trigger a parameter, which is basically each one of these slices, and then a calculation in the back end to say, this is what now you do, and this parameter is this value. So that is all fun. Okay. So mess around with parameter actions if you don't already. A lot of cool things here. All right, the last kind of part, now that I had the action to get these letters in and I had all my data and whatnot, and I've sort of alluded to this, but then I have to check someone's guess for each row to the actual word, right? That's kind of the whole point. Like, how fast can you get this word correctly? So here's a logic calc. And you don't really have to pay attention to all of it, but there's some interesting things in here that I was kind of talking about, is that using the length calculation, say if the length of the row is, of the first row guess is 5. So, right, you have to guess all the letters, not just 3 letters. I'm not going to tell you until you get 5. And then this length word guess is greater than 6. And 6 is when that enter gets in. So 1 is that first row guess, which I showed earlier, where I just scrape out the first section. There's the word guess parameter and take out the first word before the space. The other, if the whole parameter is at least greater than 6, then I'm going to do this. Then I'm going to say, okay, if the first row is 1, and then we do all this check. Let's check the first row guess against the letter, and if it's correct, right spot and right letter, it's green. Otherwise, just if it's in the word, right? So the contains function, if the word is in my first row guess letters, and the length of the first row guess is 5, again, guess the 5 already, then yellow, meaning it's in there, otherwise it's gray. Right, so that's how I've done one row at a time. Now, what I've had to do is do this for every single option, which is the 6 guesses, because eventually I got to check. When are you going to get it right? Do you ever get it right? Like, one of these, hopefully, is correct, where you've gotten the exact word. But in light of going through that whole giant calculation, because no one else needs that other than if you're going to rebuild Wordle, let's just talk about nested if-then statements. So again, if you don't use these too often, this was a kind of a big function of how a lot of this worked. So with any if-then or logic statements, the order of these is true, because Tableau checks the first, essentially Boolean, like true, false. If this is true, then do this. If it's false, do this instead. So the order matters. And I needed mine certainly to go in order from first guess to last guess. So here you'll see if the first guess, if this row, this logic statement, if that's true, then we're going to do the second section. Then check this logic statement. Now, that logic statement you'll see is nested. So there's another if-then. So if it's the first row, if that's true, then we're going to move on and check essentially the letters in that row. But if you're not on the first row, because now you're onto the second guess, which would make that first row in the statement false, then we move on to this else if. Then if it's the second row, right? Maybe you're in your second row guess. If that's true, then check this logic. And it goes on so forth and so on. So moving along this whole nested if-then statement. So that gets me to the essentially all of it. So you can see here, of course, when I tried this out and took these screenshots, I didn't have any yellow guesses. Like, I happened to get all the letters in the right spot, even though it still took me 5 tries. And so this is how this game can be either amazingly fun or annoyingly frustrating, particularly when you get very close and you can't figure out what that first letter is, because so many things might rhyme with, you know, couch and rough and dough and like all the same letters. But this is available on Tableau Public, and I'm going to show it real quick here. So this is how it works. Let's see. Anyone wants to think of a word I should guess? Because I'll take words. I don't know what the one is for really today.
Feel free to put in a suggestion in the chat. Oh, here we go. We've got there. Oh, a few to choose from here.
Oh, someone likes, because these ones are probably, if anyone has like, plays the game and does, I think a favorite first word or always does a first word. This is gonna now, like, of course, like, do something stupid on me. Oh, come on. Maybe I'll go to my thing here. My mom always does alien, so sometimes it becomes helpful if I see her text first, because technically that's like cheating, but I'll be, she guessed alien, I'm pretty sure she did. And we'll try to assume what letters she may have used. That's terrible. So you should never know someone's, primary letter or word, sorry. Makes it easier. Yeah, arise, right? So watch it be this one. No, I have no idea. So there's a couple words that, if you look at my Iron Viz, it kind of analyzes, at the time at least, analyze a lot of the words and like which letters are most common from the actual solution, not necessarily in the English alphabet. Sorry, this is like slow because my internet's slow, so let's see. Getting any letters? I know. Okay, we got 2. Anyone else want to guess? Let's see. So they're not in the right spot. Who's got one? Oh, start. That's a good one. Can't use no R. So you think about how you can. That won't work. What about? Oh yeah, that would work. Right. Well, you get the idea. So you can check it out, but it's a lot of fun. If you don't play Wordle, it takes like 5 minutes to play. You know, it gives me a little like fun thing to do quickly, and then it's done because you only play 1 game per day. Also, if I didn't mention that, so oh, come on, there we go. Watch it be right. That'd be funny. Close. All right. Well, I'll leave it at that. All right, but that is it. A whole bunch of stuff, but yeah, thank you. If anyone has any questions, and now I can certainly hang around in the chat and stuff too. But
thanks, Lindsay. Oh my gosh, that was so impressive. Just the amount of time it must have taken you to sort through all of that and figure out the various calculations and getting it to do everything you wanted to. I'm gonna go play it. I don't even play Wordle normally, but that looks like a lot of fun. I'm very impressed.
Yeah, thanks. Sometimes it's kind of like working out. It's one of those good brain challenges, but then like I don't do it for a long time because you're like, I'm exhausted, you know? So
I bet. We do have some questions for you. So one is, which resources, if any, did you consult when you were trying to figure out how you were going to build this thing?
That's a good question. Being that it was a while ago, I don't quite remember consulting a lot of things. I mean, I certainly, from a Tableau side of things, I'm not sure. A lot of it is trial and error, and I'm just trying to think it through or sketch it out. I mean, this is what I have to have happen. How is this going to actually work? From a design perspective, I certainly, looked around for ideas when I was thinking about my Iron Viz itself, but obviously the Wordle game didn't require so much of that. So, yeah. I can't really think about what I might have used, but I probably did something. There's a lot of stuff out there, right?
Yeah, I will put in a plug. There are some other games built in Tableau if that is something of interest to you. I know Josh Milligan has built a few. There's Minesweeper, which is probably similarly driven by parameter actions.
You're right.
Let's see. There's Blackjack, I think. What are some of the other ones?
There's poker. I know Kevin Flerlich has a whole one of a bunch of casino games. And then I know someone's got a checkers game out there, or maybe chess. There's definitely like a fill in the color kind of game, like not a game, but yeah, a lot of people have done some creative game type things out there.
Yeah, and then another question for you. Have you already thought of, or are you working on thinking of how you can apply some of what you've built for maybe more of a business type dashboard or in a work setting? I mean, not the letter guessing in particular, but some of the actions that you've created or just some of the techniques. Do you see how that would be applicable elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's why I try to share some other pieces of it. But, I think with any dashboard you build, sometimes you have the exact same need, but other times it's like there's some part of it that was super useful, right? So thinking through how to, like for this, the ability to think through how to structure data after knowing the end result is just a good lesson in, that practice of having an idea and then really understanding how the data needs to be organized for that. I think also doing some of the coordinate stuff, I mean, that I think about a lot, when I'm building something of how do I have to use some other type of technique to achieve the design I have. But again, I think there's a benefit for practicing outside of work because you'll be challenged in a way that perhaps, unnecessarily, right? Like all these different pieces may never have needed to be done in the same work dashboard, but it allowed me to like challenge all these things. And now I have a knowledge of if I ever need to do these complicated, logic statements or a lot of different parameter actions or even the whole wildcard parameter and just continually adding letters to it. I mean, I had never thought of that before because I never needed it. But maybe there will be a point in time where I'm going to need to do some sort of more complicated string analysis or someone type something in. I mean, you never know when interesting requirements come up. So I think it's good to practice, personally and do some what you think is weird things, but you never know when you need that technique. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. Counting how many characters have been entered into a parameter or something could come in handy for something else. I happen to notice on one of your calculations, you use the Modelo function. I'm not sure how much our audience is familiar with that one. Would you mind just speaking briefly to what it does and how it really helped you out in this particular case?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because there's probably a couple calcs that are functions that I'm not sure I'd used too often before. That was one of them. The other one is like regular expressions. I've certainly never done it before this dashboard. It's not something I'm as familiar with, but I did use that in one of them. And so that actually going back to the resources, I did have to Google how to do that because I was like, how do I use regular expressions?
Every time, for sure.
And the Modelo, however you say it, it's essentially like dividing. So it's looking for when, in that case, I did it like divide by 5. Essentially, whenever it checks for when there's not like a remainder. So when I was looking for the length of something was equally divisible by 5 to check these row counts, that's how I was looking for that the number that the guess was, there was 5 or 10, and not that someone had put in extra, had gone extra letters or hadn't completed their guess yet. So that's how I was using that to check the appropriate length.
Fabulous. Anybody else have questions for Lindsay while we have her? Feel free to put those in the Q&A.
Yeah, I'll hang around.
And well, yeah, Lindsay, if you would mind just kind of keeping an eye on that, if you have a minute, that would be great.
Yeah.
All right, and next we're going to hear from Dan Bolinson, who is an analyst and works with other analysts and engineers at Baker Tilly. and he is going to be talking to us about write-back extensions. Again, starting a new series we're doing about extensions. So if you have thoughts about extensions you'd like to learn more about, please put those in the chat, and maybe we can cover those in a future meeting. Dan, over to you.
All right. Thank you very much for making some time today. I'm going to cover extensions today, and we'll talk a lot about write-back extensions specifically, but in the context of really what extensions are. So first off, my name's Dan Bolinson. I live in Madison, and I'm part of Madison Tableau user group. I've data dev ambassador, so I definitely have been thinking about extensions for a while, and I'm excited to talk to them more today. Some of the folks at the Madison Tableau user group might have heard me talk a little bit about what we'll talk about today, which is building extensions using Python. And I work with Baker Tilly, which is a accounting consulting firm with a big office in Madison. And I do a lot of work primarily with manufacturing clients, but other sectors as well, on helping people really make better decisions using data. And so as part of that, I've been using Tableau since about 2015. And in the last, maybe since 2019 or so, we've really dug deep into extensions. We're building a lot of tools for our clients who are trying to figure out how to, integrate data into their decision-making processes. And we sort of hit a wall in terms of wanting to be able to do more with what we were doing with our dashboards. And so extensions really allowed us to do so. And that's what we'll talk about today. And so one of my broader goals is to try to convince you that you too can be writing back data and using this set of tools to really do more with your dashboards and do more in your organizations. And so by covering sort of how we're approaching that and some of the tools that are out there, I hope that we can start to think about like, what are those opportunities that exist, and which are the dashboards that you're building today that really could be used, and with which you could take that next step to think about how these types of tools can let you do more and ultimately let your users do more too. So broadly speaking, extensions are a framework that Tableau has released that allows you to do more. It exposes a set of tools to an application that you build and that you own that then lets you, set filters, read filters, set selections, and ultimately in many cases use that information and information from your users to write back to a data source or to otherwise start crossing the bridge of integrating Tableau into some of the other tools that might be in use around the organizations. So that might be third-party APIs, it might be writing back to data sources, or it might just be, doing more within the context of the dashboard itself, and we'll talk more about what that really looks like. Most of the time for us, it's all about building the business processes right into the dashboard. So we were finding that very often our dashboards were seeking to deliver insights to our users, and we wanted those users to go and do something. And so what this has allowed us to do is really let them take more actions right from within that dashboard without having to go to a different system. And we'll give some good examples of that hopefully today. And write back is really very, very often a core part to how these extensions drive value. And so today we'll really focus on what that write back looks like and what are some of the different techniques that we can use to make write back work in the context of organizations and in the context of enterprise risk, and some of the other big hot button topics that these write back use cases really do raise. Some of you may have also heard of embedding, which is really another way to extend Tableau. Broadly speaking, embedding is all about fitting Tableau inside of a web page. And extensions is all about like doing more from within your Tableau dashboard. So on the right here, we have an example of a portal we use. It was something we developed when we were in a high inflationary period to help people understand what that looked like. So it was embedded inside of one of our customer portals. And so we have a dashboard there that used the embedding framework, and we actually have an extension within that dashboard. So it's a little bit of a Russian doll, but you start to see that all of this is different ways of really doing more with Tableau. I think broadly speaking, if you are approaching this from having dashboards and wanting to do more with them, the extension framework is likely a lighter lift. And so we won't talk more about embedding, but it is worth knowing that whether you're using the extension framework or doing embedding both of them do give you that same set of tools, which is to say the Tableau APIs which you can use to accomplish some of these types of write-back goals. So some of the key use cases that we'll talk about is first enriching the data with additional insights. And I'm going to pull up some examples for each of these. The first is something that we've worked with manufacturers a lot on, which is helping them track variance. So here we've got a dashboard where we are evaluating our variance every single month, and we can then start to catalog where these sources of variance are. So we have this tornado graph down here, which is really starting to highlight which of those areas of variance are driving that delta in the month. And we see that we actually know in January which are the biggest sources of variance, be it lost new business or customer canceled. And so these reasons are data that's being created by this extension. So our users are going to be selecting one of these, reconnect. They're going to select one of these sources of variance. So specifically, they're going to pick a customer and then provide an explanation for what happened there to lead to some of that variance. And so when they click on that, it's going to ask them to explain the variance here with a couple of reasons that are predefined, which is really what's going to then let us bucket that reason. So as I go down and I start to catalog this data, that's being captured through a write-back mechanism so that when we need to, we can start to actually make more sense of what's going on when we are varying from plan. So it's a pretty simple extension, but I think it kind of captures that core idea of layering in new data that's being captured through an extension to try to provide a little bit more of the qualitative perspective as to what's going on. And we see that, all of these orange ones are basically unexplained variances. We've now explained that, so it's blue and we don't need to look at that one again. Another one is embedding Tableau in business processes. And so there's an example here that we'll cover that was for a client that worked in the healthcare space. And so they are required to keep a pretty close tabs on what specifically they are allowed to communicate with their customers. And I thought I had some screen grabs of this. Here we go. So I'm not able to show this one live, but what this does is it reports the specific employees and the infractions that are being recorded, and they select one of these infractions. And in some cases, it might prove through the discussion with that employee that, what we had previously recorded as an exception is actually, not a mark against them. These employees are, they're scored on this to be able to evaluate if they're remaining in compliance with some of those, regulated requirements that this organization is subject to. And so this then gives them a way to enrich that data by identifying certain things that basically failed the rule that would identify this as a violation, but in practice, we don't want to include it as a black mark. And so they can record that. That then gets rolled up to this dashboard that's employee specific. And so we get that full picture of which employees have been communicated with for compliance purposes. And this really does become sort of the audit trail that they maintain to demonstrate that they are being proactive in managing compliance for this stuff. So what I wanted to emphasize with this example is that we're taking a dashboard that's really important for the purposes of the organization understanding compliance and building this more deeply into the business process by also starting to capture the resolution of these non-events as well. So in this case, again, it's that enriching the data with additional information that really then starts to add value to the process. Another one that's very, very common is integrating models. So I have there's a few use cases we've done here for sales and operations planning. This is one that we've developed. Anthony Yoskovich, who's with Baker Tilly, built this one. And so this is an image classifier. And what we'll do is we're going to upload an image. What is this thing? This is a, horrifying snowman. We have, despite our best efforts, we've tried snowmen a couple of years and they haven't totally turned out. I think it's got personality. There's no doubt about that. So we can upload this to our Tableau dashboard. And it's going to try to classify this thing. So in this case, it's identifying it as a gown. So not totally correct. I guess this snowman, this image classifier doesn't believe it is, in fact, a snowman. I'd have a different opinion. But we can also generate a heat map, which is going to give us a little bit more insight into like where this AI is looking in this image to try to figure out what it is. So it's probably looking somewhere here and identifying it as a dress. We can also upload another image, and this is an image of my cat in a box. And this thing, you know, it failed this one too, plastic bags. So the image classifier is not doing well today. But what this is demonstrating is that we can use this extension framework to embed like alternative and other ways of doing analysis and other ways of looking at this right within our dashboard. So in all of these cases, there is a general process that's being followed. First, the dashboard is generating an insight. So we are, you know, just like all of our dashboards, we're trying to present our users some amount of information. We are then going to ask them to make a decision. And most often, this is going to be some other UI that's included in our dashboard. So in the variance example, it was that box that popped up and basically asked them to explain it. We're going to capture that data and we're going to persist that. And that then persisted data gets fed back into the dashboard and then generates that additional insight. And, you know, they might need to make another decision based on that, but that sort of completes that flow. How that data gets persisted is a big part of thinking through this write back frame. Like when you're thinking about this stuff, understanding your data sources becomes even more important because ultimately you're now talking about changing them. So that might be a database update. It might be a REST API call. There's a range of solutions that might look like, and it's really going to be data source specific. But what I wanted to emphasize is that, you know, which those data sources are depends on your use case. So what's really required to make this work is that you need a data source feeding Tableau, and we've got a web service that's connected through the Tableau API that drives our extension. I'm going to talk through Anvil X today. Anvil X is a pure Python framework that lets us build extensions. And so from, you know, coming from a background of data science and data analytics, Python is, I guess, my language of choice. It's what I know. And it's a way that we, you know, the challenge with a lot of these extensions is that they are web services. And so, you know, for us, we had a really, really hard time with them at first because we are not a web dev team. We're, you know, ultimately a data science and analytics team. And so with Anvil X, that lets us move this ball forward because it's, you know, in Python, which we know or can figure out. And then finally, we need to be writing back to that data source. So I'll talk a little bit further about Anvil X, but I do think it's a really useful tool for this. Primarily because it is like a way to build these types of extensions in Python. But what I'm talking about does generalize to other ways of building extensions. The key is that at the end of the day, an extension is an application that has to exist alongside Tableau. Anvil X is not an extension. It's really a way of building extensions. So I'll just emphasize that since, you know, each of the use cases and I think you've probably seen that, these use cases are pretty diverse, but they are all built using these same sets of tools. So how this actually works is Tableau is running these dashboards and it's letting this web service interact with that dashboard. So as I'm making selections or as I'm making filters or as these things are occurring in the dashboard, we can then have our Python that's responding to those events. So if we want to show a UI or we want to capture data, all of that's driven by the events that are going on within the dashboard. And so So for those who have some scripting background, effectively what's happening is whenever you make a selection, a function is getting called. And so as you're building these extensions, you're building and writing functions that then take the action that you want to have take place as and when that event occurs. For example, the user making a selection. So as we're thinking about write back, there are really three main ways that this usually takes place. The first one is to update the data. You just go and make the change. And this is, I think, the one that we most often think about when we think about the write back, like the idea of writing back data. So one example of this that we have is a Salesforce example. So here's a dashboard where we are keeping track of opportunities and specifically identifying opportunities that need review, where there's some business rules here. Like if it's closing 1 to 3 months out, then we would have expected it to be updated in the last, say, 14 days. So this is a Tableau dashboard. And when I select one of these opportunities, we're actually making an API call to Salesforce to go and get some more information. And then when I, for example, update the stage or I add a new task, as I'm completing this information, that's actually being saved back to Salesforce. And so the key idea here is that we are updating that source data through this through this dashboard by virtue of giving these people or giving our users a form and a way of persisting and capturing that new data. So if I think back to what I showed before, this is that. I've got a dashboard that's trying to highlight the issues or the opportunities that need review. When somebody makes a selection, it is pulling up additional information about that opportunity. And the action that a user can take is to update that directly from this dashboard. And that'll then go and write back to Salesforce. And so that's a very powerful mechanism. It's great when you are trying to build a dashboard into a business process. And I think the Salesforce opportunities pipeline updates is a really good example of that. But at the end of the day, it's important to note that you're updating source data. So that's with that comes a host of challenges. You need to make sure you have the access, or you're working with the team that does have the access to have permission to do that. And there's a host of real considerations that come with that. Another mechanism is to enrich the data. And I think this is not what we really think of when we're thinking about like a traditional write back use case, but I think is probably where 8 out of 10 of our extensions lie, because it's a way to get some of that same type of information from our users and to augment some of what the Tableau dashboards do without changing the source data and all the host of challenges that come with this. So this is a great example of the variance explanation dashboard I shared. This is, that's an area where the raw data identifies issues or variances to plan. And then that mechanism of capturing that additional user data gives us the ability to enrich that by letting us layer in that additional information that the user can provide. And finally, layering in new data is another mechanism where it really is meant to override the existing data. We don't need to make a change to the source data in order to represent those changes to our users. And this is really what we're doing with that exception management example that I shared with that healthcare medical device manufacturing company. We don't need to write back to the source data to be able to layer in those exceptions that we're overriding by basically maintaining a separate list of those exceptions that we blend in, and we literally use data blend relationships or cross database joins for that, and to enrich that data without needing to like actually go and write to source, which is tricky. So as we're sitting down to build an AnvilX app with write back, there's a couple of this is the process we take. We're first trying to identify the use case. What is it that our users need to be able to do? The next thing we'll do is we'll decide on our storage mechanism, which really goes back. Are we going to update the data? Are we going to enrich the data? Are we going to layer in new data? And if so, how are we going to do that? We then build the capture form. We build that UI. We tie it into the dashboard, usually by leveraging the selection event, because that's sort of most natural for most folks. I click on a thing, I want to make a change to it. And then we write that ability to write back to the source data, and we'll blend in new data. So we're going to do a quick example of that. I won't build it from scratch, but I'll just walk through that process. So first, let's say we're looking at our favorite Superstore dashboard. In this case, we want to do two things. We want to first capture the targets that are related to each of our states, so we know, if these are all against target, but what if we need to be able to manage or change those targets from this dashboard? And second, we want to be able to really track that variance. This is all year over year, and we want to get a little bit more target oriented. The next thing we'll do is we're going to establish that we're using Anvil data tables. So I'll pull up Anvil here just to talk through what that looks like. This is the Anvil UI. So first we have there's sort of three main things here. We have a drag and drop interface that we can use to build what our users see. We have Python code that's running when users make a selection, for example. And we have data tables, which is how we're persisting that data. And so, the nice part about this is if I need to add a new table, I can just go ahead and do it. Define a new schema. So maybe I have my state and my target. And this is now a new data source that I can plug Tableau into. In this case, we've already done that. So we've got all of our states and all of our targets. And we've also got all of our explanations of variance. And so that's the data we're going to write back to. So we've kind of got our data storage mechanism sorted out. We're going to use it to blend in. So we're not affecting source data. We're just seeking to enrich it. And then we'll create that new UI to capture targets and variance reasons. So I already shared the UI for the targets, and we'll show the UI for the variance. So again, this is just drag and drop. You can select from the different components, be it buttons, labels, or data capture fields, like a text box, and we can build the UI that we need for our users to make this work. And we'll tie that into the state selection. So if I look at my code, I see that there is a dashboard event for a selection changed. And as I said earlier, when someone makes a selection, we're going to call a function. And that's all that's going on. So we have a selection changed callback, and that's going to do a couple of things, mainly showing the state and setting us up to capture the information that we want from our users. Then we'll write back to the source data. And so that's done when somebody actually, if we go back to our UI, what we want to have happen, someone selects a state, they will fill out the text area, they're going to choose a reason, and they're going to press save. So the save callback is going to be here, and we're going to add a row to the data table. And I won't go into this in detail, but I think the key here is that it's a one line to be able to then write new data to the data table that then is again available in Tableau. And finally, we're going to show the new targets and variance reasons in the dashboard. And that really is setting up that blend relationship so that we can capture it. So in this case, we've got our targets data, which is that information we're capturing from our users with our target and our state. And if we look at our dashboard here, we see our sales variance, which is just the sum of the sales. Oh, sorry, I need to look at the variance percent. I look at the sum of the sales less our target. So we didn't do, in this case, we're using a blend relationship, not a cross database join. So I need to work at a level of aggregation. That's why I'm summing them up. But this is then going to show variance to plan as opposed to previously, I think we were showing difference from last year. So we see our target and our sales for each of the states, and they're colored by how far off we were. So when all is said and done, those are the sort of 6 key building blocks. And we can come, and this is the final, the finished product. I can select a state. Reconnect. I can select a state or a province, and it's going to pull up any type of history of comments that have been made. I can leave a new comment, which are shared with anyone else who's using this dashboard. That's going to be persisted then in that data table. And if we need to choose a reason for a variance, we can do that from our drop down here, really just the same way that we shared earlier on the variance side. We also have the set targets button. So now targets at the state level can be established also just from within our dashboard, as long as I'm editing it. So if I look at this from a viewer's perspective, not the dashboard builder's perspective, that set targets button is going to be gone. So yeah, you see that set targets button is no longer shown. And so that's it. So, I think that for a lot of folks, there is a jump on the Python side, but I do really think that there's, the level, there's a couple of lines of code at the end of the day. And so what I was really trying to do is to try to show that it's very possible, especially when we take away the constraint of writing back to the source data and think about other creative solutions that let us blend in some of the alternative data we want to capture to share with our users. There's a bunch more information. I won't cover Anvil X in too much more detail here, but there's information out there, or feel free to reach out. I really think that it's a useful way to build these extensions for dashboard devs, just because it offers a pretty good development experience. It's pure Python at the end of the day, and we have that ability to use those data tables that can connect to Tableau. So if that's of interest, there's no better way to get started. I'll share some more resources, or just reach out if that's of interest. And I think that it is a really, really powerful way to give new ways of interacting with dashboards for our users. And so take a look. And as I said, please reach out if you've got questions or want to dig deeper. There's some good, there's a T-Rex jacket, which is an open source project that we support that includes a bunch of tutorials to get started. So give it a go. And I really appreciate the time today. It was, thanks for making that work.
Thank you, Dan. So informative. We do have a question for you from our audience.
Great.
Would a Salesforce write back require that the end users have a Salesforce account?
Not necessarily. So in that case, we typically credentialize like a bot account using a token. So the users are like the Tableau users are not necessarily, we're not using the Tableau users account to write that back necessarily. In that case, we're not. It's kind of something that needs to be decided as we're building that out. But in the example that I shared, there's like a bot account that's the one that is credentialized to write back to Salesforce.
Okay, fantastic. And new question. Nick was just joining us, missed some of the content, but curious to know if these extensions are included with the Tableau license.
So Anvil X is a separate product. The extensions I shared today, I can definitely share the clone link that would let you make a copy of those to build on that. Give me a shout and let me know which one is of interest. I think there are a bunch of starting extensions too that Anvil offers, specifically around like some of that enrichment of data and the ability to explain variances. Those are offered as like starting extensions effectively. The extension framework is, that one is included with Tableau. There are some configurations you need to make to enable it on the server or in Tableau Cloud, but that's stock Tableau.
Great, thank you. And I put in the chat earlier the link to the Tableau Extension Gallery. There's actually a lot of content there. If you haven't checked out extensions in a while, you might want to take another look. They keep adding more, and some of them do really great things. Also want to apologize. Apparently my camera has decided to revolt, so I don't know why I'm still here. So thanks, Dan. One last question. Do you have a favorite extension from the gallery that you would recommend people check out?
Oh, for better or for worse, we kind of just build our own.
Fair enough. If you have the ability to do so and can make it do exactly what you're looking for, that makes sense.
I mean, and it is that exactly what you're looking for, I think has been, we did look at that when we were first going down the road. And I think the reality is that each of our clients is a little bit different. And so the ability to really meet their specific needs was really important to us.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Dan.
Well, I appreciate the time. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. So yeah, if you wanted to get some more details from that extension, feel free to put that in the chat or send them a direct message. We are going to wrap up our meeting here by talking about some of the upcoming events. So we don't have a lot of details, but we just want to share our schedule with you in case you are new to our group, the Wisconsin Tug. We coordinate with the Madison and Milwaukee Tug so that we alternate meetings, so that we don't have more than one of our meetings in the same month. And you can see our schedule here in alternating order. So here we are in January for Wisconsin. Our next meeting will be in April, date to be determined, but our meetings are always virtual. And we will be having our meeting right before Tableau Conference. So if you haven't been getting all the notifications, they have announced where and when. I think they're opening up registration in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for more details about that. So we may address something related to conference in our next meeting. We'll see. Let us know if that would be of interest. Milwaukee will actually be the next meeting that happens in February. They're planning on it in person, as is Madison Tug in March, probably towards the end of the month. And if you are a local and interested in either of those, you are welcome. Feel free to join either or both of those groups through Bevy, just like you joined our group here. All right, and then the next piece of business we have to get to, we want to give away some prizes. We're so grateful to have all of you joining our meetings and engaging with us. So what I have been doing behind the scenes during these presentations is I took a list of all the people who checked into this meeting and I sorted it randomly and then had a random number generator choose one. And likewise for the folks who have been engaging with us. So if you asked a question or posted in the chat, we really like to reward people who not just attend our meetings, but engage with them. So I did a similar process to pick somebody from that list. So without further ado, I'll announce our two winners. And we would like for you to send us your email address. Either you can direct message me or put it in the chat and we'll reach out to you to get your prize. You will have some options to choose from. But our two winners today are Megan Elderbrook, as from our attendee list. So congratulations, Megan. And from our engagement list, we have Brooks Gallman. So thank you, Megan and Brooks, for attending, for participating. Please reach out with your contact info so we can get you your prizes. And thank you to everybody for participating and joining us today. Hopefully you learned something useful, and we hope to see you back at our next meeting in April. And that is our meeting for today. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, the snowy day here in Wisconsin, and we'll see you in the future.